I never expected to find someone sitting on my porch steps in the dark. My name is Eli Marsh. I'm 37 years old, and I fix things for a living. Fishing equipment, mostly, out of a small shop my father left me on the edge of Calder Bay, Maine. Reels, rods, nets, the occasional outboard motor that someone's pushed past its reasonable limits. It's quiet work, the kind where you spend a lot of hours alone with your hands and your thoughts, which suits me fine because I've never had trouble filling the quiet. Calder Bay is a small town, the kind where everybody knows which truck belongs to who and what time the lights go out at whose house. I've lived here my whole life. My father grew up here, his father before him. The shop has been on Carver Street since 1962. I took it over when Dad got sick, and when he died 3 years ago I kept it going because it was what I knew, and because honestly I didn't know what else I would do. My ex-wife Diane left 5 years ago. She said Calder Bay was too small. She said I was too predictable. She said life with me felt like standing still. I didn't argue with her because I didn't know how to explain that standing still had always felt, to me, like the same thing as being steady. That those two things weren't the same. By the time I figured out how to say it, she was already gone. I hadn't been with anyone seriously since. I wasn't avoiding it. I just hadn't found a reason to change the shape of my days. That changed on a Tuesday in October. I was coming home late from the shop, a stubborn motor that needed one more hour than I'd planned, and I almost didn't see her. She was sitting on the second step from the bottom, knees pulled up, back against the railing, a small duffel bag beside her. She wasn't moving. The porch light caught her face when I came up the walk, and she looked at me without startling, which told me she'd heard me coming and had already decided to stay put. She said I didn't know where else to go. That was the whole introduction. No name, no explanation, no apology for being on a stranger's porch in the dark. Just that sentence, said quietly and honestly, the way you say something when it's simply true and there's no use dressing it up. I looked at her for a moment, then I said, "Come inside." Her name was May Calloway. She told me that over the cup of tea I made while she sat at my kitchen table looking at her hands like they might tell her what to say next. She was 30, she said. She'd been in Calder Bay for about 3 weeks, staying at the inn on Harbor Street. She'd come here because she needed somewhere to go that wasn't where she'd been, and Calder Bay had come up in a search for small towns with short-term rentals, and she'd picked it off a map with the same logic you use when you close your eyes and point. She had come from Portland. Before Portland, a few other places. She'd been moving for about a year, she said, which is what you do when you're trying to put distance between yourself and a situation that has a way of following you. She didn't say what the situation was. Not that night. I didn't ask. What I asked was whether she'd eaten anything. She said she hadn't, not since noon. I made eggs and toast and put them in front of her and sat across the table, and didn't make her fill the silence with explanations she wasn't ready to give. After she ate, she looked up at me. She had dark eyes, the kind that take a while to read, and they were tired in a way that went deeper than just missing sleep. "Why did you let me in?" she said. I thought about it. "You said you didn't know where else to go," I said. "That's a real thing to say. People don't say that unless they mean it." She looked at me for a moment, then she looked back down at her tea. "I'll find somewhere else tomorrow," she said. "The inn is full and the one in Rockport said they had a room." "You can have the spare room tonight," I said. "Figure out Rockport in the morning." She didn't argue. She was too tired to argue. She thanked me and I showed her to the room at the end of the hall, the one with the window that looks out over the water, and said there were extra blankets in the closet. She closed the door and I went back to the kitchen and sat there for a while, not quite sure what had just happened. In the morning, she was still there. She hadn't left for Rockport. She was in my kitchen when I came downstairs, standing at the stove with the coffee already made, scrambling eggs without having been asked. "I can leave after breakfast," she said, not turning around. I wanted to do something first." I sat down at the table. "You don't have to leave," I said. She turned then, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm a stranger," she said. "I know what you are," I said. "The spare room's empty anyway." She turned back to the eggs, didn't say anything, but she didn't leave. That was how it started. Not with a plan or a conversation or any kind of formal agreement. Just a Tuesday night and a second morning and a woman making eggs in my kitchen who needed somewhere to be for a while. I told myself it was practical. The room was empty. It cost me nothing. That was the whole story. I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. The first week, she kept to herself in the way of someone who has learned to take up as little space as possible. She was up early and quiet about it. She'd leave the coffee made when I came down, which I noticed on the second day and didn't mention because mentioning it would have made it into something when she probably just needed it not to be something. She went out during the days. I didn't ask where. She'd started going to the library. I found that out later, from the librarian, not from May. She'd go in the mornings and sit for a few hours and then walk the harbor before coming back. She was learning the town in the careful way of someone who wasn't sure yet how long she'd be in it and didn't want to get attached to things she might have to leave. When I came home in the evenings, the kitchen was tidier than I'd left it, which I also didn't mention. Small things. The kind that accumulate without announcing themselves. On the fifth day she came into the shop. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the workbench and the shelves of parts and the rods hanging along the back wall. "This is yours?" she said. "Was my dad's," I said. "Now it's mine." She came in and walked slowly along the shelves, looking at things without touching them. She stopped in front of an old reel I'd been working on, a 1970s Penn Senator that belonged to a retired lobsterman named Pete, who brought it in every year regardless of whether anything was wrong with it. "Can I watch?" she said. I said yes. She pulled a stool to the side of the bench and sat down and watched me work for the better part of an hour without saying much. Not uncomfortable silence, just quiet companionship, the kind you don't have to earn. When I finished, she said, "You're good at this." "It's what I do," I said. "I mean, you're patient with it," she said. "Like it matters to you. Not just the fixing, but the thing itself. You care about the thing." I looked at the Penn Senator in my hand. Pete's father had used it before Pete had. It had stories in it. "Yeah," I said. "I care about the thing." She looked at me for a moment with those dark reading eyes. Then she nodded once and got off the stool and went back to the house. I sat with that for the rest of the afternoon. I heard about Cole Farron on a Thursday, a week and a half after May had moved into the spare room. I was getting coffee at the Harbor Diner when Gus Penny, who ran the bait shop 2 doors down from mine, slid onto the stool beside me with the particular energy of someone carrying information they consider important. "You hear about the woman staying up at your place?" he said. I said I knew her. She was renting the spare room. Gus nodded slowly. He said he'd heard some things, that her name was May Calloway, and she'd left a man down in Portland named Cole Farron. That Cole had been asking around about her, had called the inn, had left a message with someone at the marina. That people who knew Cole said he was a reasonable man, and that May had some kind of history of this, moving from place to place, leaving situations that were, from what Cole said, situations she'd created. I drank my coffee and listened. When Gus was done, I said, "How well do you know Cole Farron?" Gus said he didn't, not personally, but a friend of a friend knew him and said he was a good guy, very normal, very reasonable. I said, "Thanks, Gus," and paid for my coffee and went back to the shop. That evening May was in the kitchen when I got home. She was reading at the table. She was always reading. She went through books the way some people go through coffee, constantly, and she looked up when I came in. I sat down across from her. "I heard some things today," I said, "about Cole Farron." She went very still. The kind of still that tells you someone was waiting for this conversation and is now deciding how to have it. "What did you hear?" she said. I told her, all of it. What Gus had said. What Cole had apparently been saying around town, the picture that had been painted. I said it all without editorializing because she deserved to know what was being said and I wasn't going to soften it. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she closed her book and put it on the table and looked at me. "Do you believe it?" she said. I said, "I'm asking you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she told me. Not everything, not that night, but enough. She told me about the first year, which was good. She told me about the second year, when things started to shift in ways she kept explaining away. She told me about the way Cole operated, which was not with raised voices or dramatic scenes, but with the slow, patient work of making a person doubt what they saw and heard and felt. She told me she'd left twice before, and come back twice, because he was very good at making her believe the leaving was the problem, rather than the reason for it. "He tells people I'm unstable," she said, "that I create chaos and then disappear. It's easier than the truth because the truth is harder to explain. I looked at her across the table, at the dark, tired eyes and the careful way she held herself, like someone who had learned that taking up too much space had consequences. I said, "I believe you." She looked at me like she wasn't sure she'd heard right. "I believe you," I said again. She pressed her lips together, looked at the table. When she looked back up, her eyes were bright. "Why?" she said. "Because you've been here a week and a half," I said. "And not once have you asked me for anything you didn't need. People who create chaos for sport don't do that." She didn't say anything. She just sat there for a moment with those bright eyes. Then she said, quietly, "Thank you." That was the night things shifted, not dramatically, not with some declaration or moment of clarity. Just a Thursday evening at a kitchen table where I said two words and something that had been held very tightly in May Calloway for a very long time loosened, just slightly, around the edges. She started leaving the lights on when she knew I was coming home late. I noticed it the first time on a Wednesday. I was later than usual, a complicated job that ran past 8, and I could see the kitchen window lit up from the end of the driveway. I stood there for a second before I went in, looking at it. It was a small thing. She hadn't said anything about it. She was just in there reading, same as she always was, and the lights were on because they were on. Nothing to analyze. But I noticed it. She had a rhythm by the second week. Coffee made by 6:30, out in the morning, back by mid-afternoon. Reading in the evenings, sometimes on the porch if the weather was right, sometimes at the kitchen table. She'd started coming into the shop again. Not every day, but often enough that I'd gotten used to seeing her stool pulled up beside the bench, hearing her turn pages while I worked. She didn't talk a lot, but when she did say something, it was worth hearing. She noticed things. The way a particular reel was designed, what it said about the era it came from, the way the light changed over the bay at different times of day. Small observations, offered simply, without the need for a response. One afternoon she said, out of nowhere, "You never ask where I've been." "Not my business," I said. "Most people would ask," she said. "I'm not most people." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "No, you're not." I didn't look up from what I was working on, but something about the way she said it settled in my chest like something finding its place. Cole Farron arrived in Calder Bay on a Friday morning in November, which I found out about from Ray Tillis, who ran the marina and was my closest friend and had apparently had a conversation with Cole the previous afternoon. Ray came by the shop that evening. He leaned on the counter and said, carefully, that he'd met a man who was looking for May. "I know," I said. "He's been making calls." "He seems all right," Ray said. "Normal. Says he's just worried about her. Says she does this, disappears, that she has some difficulties." I set down what I was working on. "Did she seem like she had difficulties to you when you met her?" Ray hadn't met her. He said so. "Then you're going on what one person told you," I said. "About another person he has reasons to make look a certain way." Ray was quiet for a moment. "Eli," he said, "I've known you a long time. Be careful, okay? You don't know this woman." "I know her well enough," I said. He left, and I could tell from the set of his shoulders that he didn't feel good about the conversation and wasn't going to let it go. Ray was a good man and a loyal friend, and he was wrong about this, and that combination was going to cause problems. I went home, and May was on the porch when I pulled up, sitting in the old wooden chair with her book and a blanket over her knees, and she watched me park and come up the walk with the particular attentiveness she had when she was reading something in a person's face. "Cole's here," I said. "I know," she said. "I saw his car on Harbor Street this afternoon." "Are you all right?" She thought about it honestly, which I appreciated. She didn't say yes automatically the way people do when they're deflecting. "I'm scared," she said. "But I'm not surprised. This is what he does. He follows." I sat down on the step below her. We stayed like that for a while, looking out at the water. The bay was going dark, the lights of the boats coming on one by one. "What do you need?" I said. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I need him to understand that it's over, that I'm not going back. But every time I've tried to do that, he reframes it, makes it about my instability, my patterns, turns it around until I start to sound unreasonable even to myself." "You sound completely reasonable to me," I said. She looked at me. "That's because you're not him." "No," I said, "I'm not." We sat in the quiet for a while longer. The water was black now, and the lights from the harbor made long reflections on the surface. May said quietly, "Why are you doing this, Eli? You didn't have to take any of this on." I thought about Diane saying life with me felt like standing still. I thought about the shop and the empty house and the evenings that had been fine, manageable, quietly enough, until a woman sat down on my porch steps in the dark and said she didn't know where else to go. "Because when you came here," I said, "the lights in the house were on for the first time in a long time." She looked at me. "I mean that," I said. "The actual lights. You leave them on, I noticed." She looked away, out at the water. But I saw what happened to her expression when she looked away, and it was the kind of thing you remember. Cole came to the shop on a Saturday morning. I had been expecting it. He was in his early 40s, the kind of good-looking that photographs well, with an easy manner and a way of filling a room that wasn't loud but was very present. He shook my hand with both of his, which is something people do when they want you to feel warmly received. "You must be Eli," he said. "May's mentioned you." "She hasn't mentioned you," I said. "Not by name, just by description." Something flickered across his face, fast. Then the easy manner came back. He said he was worried about May. He said she had a pattern of this, running, starting over, burning things down. He said he cared about her and just wanted to make sure she was okay, and that whoever she was staying with understood the situation. "What situation?" I said. He explained, smoothly, with the patience of someone who had explained this before. May struggled with stability. May had difficulty maintaining relationships and housing situations. May had a way of constructing narratives about the people around her that didn't always match reality. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "She's been here 3 weeks. She makes the coffee in the morning. She reads books. She comes into the shop and sits quietly while I work." That's the May the first know. Cole looked at me with an expression that managed to be both sympathetic and pitying. "That's early days," he said. "It's always good at first." "I'll take my chances," I said. He was quiet for a moment. The easy manner cooled a little at the edges. "I hope you know what you're taking on," he said. "I think I do," I said. He left. I watched him go and felt the particular stillness that comes after a conversation that was civil on the surface and something else underneath. That afternoon, Ray came by. He'd heard Cole's version of events and wanted to talk. I let him talk. I told him I'd heard it too, and I had a different read on the situation. Ray said he was worried about me. I said I appreciated it. We left it at that, but I could feel the distance between us and it wasn't comfortable. I told May about the shop visit that evening. She listened and then was quiet for a while. "He's going to keep doing this," she said. "Talking to people, building a picture. It's what he does. Eventually, everyone in this town is going to have an opinion about me, and it's going to be his opinion." "Not everyone," I said. She looked at me. "Eli, he's going to make your life difficult." "That's his choice," I said, "not mine." She shook her head slowly. "I don't understand you," she said. "I keep waiting for the part where you decide it's too much." "It's not too much," I said. "How do you know?" I looked at her across the kitchen table, at the book she'd set down, at the blanket she'd brought in from the porch that was folded over the back of her chair, at the coffee mug that had become her coffee mug without either of us making it her coffee mug. "Because you're still here," I said, "and I'm glad you are." She pressed her lips together, looked at the table. "That's not a good enough reason to deal with all of this," she said. "It's good enough for me," I said. Cole made his move in December, a month after he'd arrived. He didn't do anything dramatic. He didn't have to. He simply talked to people, the right people, in the right order, and let the town do the rest. Within 2 weeks, there was a version of May circulating in Calder Bay that I didn't recognize. Unstable, manipulative, a woman who attached herself to stable men and made their lives difficult. Cole was the reasonable one who had tried to help her and been pushed away for his trouble. The version was convincing because Cole was convincing and because people generally prefer a clean story to a complicated one, and because May was quiet and private and didn't go around countering the narrative with her own. I went to see Ruth Callahan at the health center, who had known May professionally. May had volunteered there for the past month, helping with filing and scheduling. Ruth told me what she'd seen. Someone who showed up on time, worked carefully, got along with everyone, and once stayed an extra hour without being asked when the receptionist called in sick. Does that sound unstable to you? I said. No, Ruth said. It sounds like someone who needed something to do and was grateful to have it. I went to the inn and talked to Carol, who had turned May away the night May had ended up on my porch. Carol said May had been polite about it, had thanked her, and had asked if she knew of anywhere else. Carol had given her my address because she knew I had a spare room, and she hadn't even thought about it twice. She seemed fine to me, Carol said. Tired, but fine. I collected these accounts the way I collected parts for a repair, carefully, making sure each one fit before I moved to the next. Then I went to see Cole. I found him at the marina, talking to Ray. He saw me coming and his expression did something careful and prepared itself. I said, I want to talk to you. We walked to the end of the dock. The water was gray and the wind was cold and there was no one else nearby. I said, I know what you've been doing. I know how it works. You build a picture of her and you make sure it's the first thing people see when they look at her. He started to speak. I let him start and then I kept going. I've talked to Ruth at the health center. I've talked to Carol at the inn. I've talked to Pete Alderman and Grace Ferris and Donna Whitfield and half a dozen other people who have actually spent time with May in the past month. They don't recognize the woman you're describing. Cole's jaw tightened. She's not going back to Portland, I said. She's not going back to you. And every time you try to make her sound like something she isn't, I'm going to find one more person who knows differently. He looked at me for a long moment. You don't know what you're talking about, he said. His voice had lost the warmth. Maybe, I said. But I know May, and I know what it looks like when someone is telling the truth. He left Calder Bay 2 days later. Not because I'd driven him out. I hadn't, not really. But because the picture he'd been building had started to have cracks in it, and Cole Farron was the kind of man who moved on when the situation stopped working in his favor. Ray came to the shop the day after Cole left. He stood in the doorway for a moment, hands in his pockets, then came in and sat on May's stool. I think I got it wrong, he said. You got it wrong, I said, not unkindly. I should have talked to her, he said, instead of just taking his word. Yeah, I said. Is she okay? She will be, I said. He nodded, sat there for another minute. Then he said, She's good for you, Eli. I can see that now. He stood up. I'm sorry it took me this long. He left, and I sat in the shop for a while with Pete's Penn Senator in my hands, thinking about the particular cost of being believed late versus being believed at all. May went to the police on a Thursday, not to report Cole for anything dramatic. There was nothing dramatic to report, but to put on record the pattern, the history, the documented incidents from Portland that she'd been carrying in a folder in her duffel bag since she left. A woman at the station named Officer Delaney took her statement carefully and said the documentation was thorough and she was glad May had it. May came to the shop afterward. She sat down on her stool and didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, I've done that before, reported things. It never seemed to matter. It builds a record, I said. It matters eventually. You sound sure. I'm not sure, I said. But I think doing the right thing still matters, even when you can't see the result yet. She looked at me. How do you do that? Do what? Stay that steady, she said. It's not simple. You're not simple. You don't get moved off center. I can't figure out how you do it. I thought about Diane saying I was too still, about the years I'd spent wondering if she was right, if steadiness was actually just an inability to move. I think it's easier to stay steady, I said, when you have something worth staying for. May was quiet for a long moment. Then very quietly she said, Is that what I am? I looked at her. Yes, I said, that's what you are. She looked down at the bench. I watched her press her lips together the way she did when she was keeping something in. Then she looked up. I haven't been able to trust anyone in a long time, she said. I want you to know that. I want you to know that what you've done here, I see it, I feel it. I don't know how to move toward it without being afraid of what happens when it doesn't work. I know, I said. I'm not saying no, she said. I'm saying I'm scared. I know that too, I said. I'm not in a hurry. She looked at me for a long moment. Something in her expression settled. Not resolved, not finished, but settled, the way water settles after something has been dropped into it. Okay, she said. Okay, I said. December passed and January came in cold and quiet. May was still in the spare room, though the spare room had gradually stopped feeling spare. She'd put a plant on the windowsill and a stack of books on the nightstand and a pair of boots by the door that were clearly staying. She found work. A woman named Donna Whitfield, who ran a small bookshop on Main Street, needed help 3 days a week, and May had walked in to buy a novel and walked out with a job. Donna said later that she'd hired her because of the way May handled the books, carefully, like they mattered, which told Donna something about how she'd handle everything else. I heard about it from Donna, not from May. May mentioned it that evening at dinner briefly, the way she mentioned most things about herself. Factually, without embellishment, as if she wasn't sure how much space the information deserved. That's good, I said. It's 3 days a week, she said. It's not much. It's a start, I said. She looked at me. You're not going to tell me I don't need to worry about it, that I can stay as long as I want? Would you believe me if I did? I said. She thought about it. No, she said. Then I won't say it, I said. But it's still true. She looked at her plate. Something in her face did the thing it did sometimes, where you could see her deciding whether to believe something or not, and the decision wasn't easy and she was making it honestly. We settled into the kind of winter rhythm that forms slowly and holds well. Dinner most nights, walks along the harbor when the weather allowed, which in Maine in January was not often, but when it did we went. She'd started helping in the shop on Saturday mornings, not with the technical work, but with the cataloging and ordering, which I'd always let slide, and which she took on with the same careful attention she gave everything. One evening in late January she asked me why I never talked about Diane. Not in an accusatory way, just curious. I thought about it. Because it doesn't feel relevant, I said. She was right about some things and wrong about others, and we weren't right for each other. That's the whole story. She said you were too still, May said. You've been paying attention, I said. I always pay attention, she said. Was she right? I used to wonder, I said. I don't anymore. May was quiet for a moment. What changed? I looked at her. You came and sat on my steps, I said, and everything that happened after that felt like the opposite of standing still. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Not a squeeze, not a dramatic gesture, just her hand, warm and deliberate, placed where it was. I turned my hand over and held hers. We sat like that for a while, in the kitchen, in January, in the quiet that had a person in it now instead of just me. Spring came slowly to Calder Bay the way it always does, reluctantly, in fits and starts, one warm day followed by 3 cold ones. But it came. May's plant on the windowsill put out new leaves. She bought 2 more for the kitchen. She didn't ask if that was all right. She just put them there, and they looked right, and that was the end of it. Ray and May had dinner with us in March, which was Ray's way of making things right without making a speech about it. He brought wine and was slightly awkward for the first 20 minutes, and then May asked him about the marina, and he forgot to be awkward, and by the end of the evening the 3 of us had made plans to go out on his boat when the weather warmed up. Pete Alderman brought his Penn Senator in for its annual visit in April. He talked to May for 20 minutes about his late wife, who had also loved to read. He left, as he always did, without anything being actually wrong with the reel. May watched him go and said, "He doesn't bring it in because it needs fixing, does he?" "No," I said. "He brings it in because it belonged to his father," she said. "And when he brings it here, someone takes care of it." "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "That's why you do this," she said. "Not just fixing things, caring for them." I looked at the Penn Senator in my hands. "Everything worth keeping needs someone to take care of it," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. Small and real, the kind she didn't give away easily. "Yes," she said, "it does." On an evening in May, we were sitting on the porch, which we did most evenings now that the weather allowed. The bay was calm, and the light was going long and gold, the way it does in spring. May had her book, but she wasn't reading, she was watching the water. She said, "I want to tell you something." I waited. "I came here because I closed my eyes and pointed at a map," she said. "That's really how I picked it. I needed somewhere, and I picked the first small town that came up, and I didn't expect anything from it." She paused. "I didn't expect you." "I didn't expect you either," I said. "I know," she said. "That's not a complaint." She looked over at me. "What I mean is, I've been thinking about what it is, what this is, and I think it's the thing I stopped believing I would find. Someone who just stays, who doesn't need me to be different or smaller or more whatever, who just stays." I looked at her, at the water behind her and the light on her face and the book closed in her lap. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. She nodded, looked at the water again. Then she said, "The lights." "What? You said that, months ago, that I leave the lights on and you noticed." She was quiet for a moment. "I did it on purpose. I'm not sure I knew I was doing it on purpose at the time, but I was." "Why?" I said. She looked at me. "Because I wanted you to see them, when you were coming home. I wanted there to be something to come home to." I sat with that for a moment. "May," I said. "Yeah, I love you," I said, in case that needed to be said out loud. She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I wondered if I'd moved too fast. Then she said, "It needed to be said out loud." "And," I said. She turned and looked at me, those dark reading eyes, and in them something that had been careful and contained was letting itself be seen. "I love you too," she said. "I've loved you since the night you didn't ask me any questions." We sat on the porch as the light went down over the bay, and the lights in the house behind us were on. Both of us knew they always would be. The night in late January when May asked about Diane, we talked longer than we usually did. She asked careful questions and I gave careful answers, and somewhere in the middle of it I realized I was talking about things I hadn't talked about in years. Not because I'd been hiding them, but because there hadn't been anyone who asked in a way that made the answers feel worth giving. May listened the way she listened to everything, completely, without the half-present quality that most people bring to other people's stories. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "She was wrong about the stillness. It's not the same as standing still. It's more like being a place that holds." I looked at her. "You're a place that holds," she said. "That's not the same thing at all." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything, but I thought about it for a long time after.